And we're back. Thank you so much for choosing to stay with us. Just continuing with our conversation with Mr. Peter Gikonyo, who is the chairman of the Kenya Coffee Producers Association. Now, one of the biggest blows that is hitting the industry, of course, is the European Union deforestation regulation. And we've listened to the CS, and from where he sits, there's no cause for alarm. But Ukukwa ground, what are your thoughts on this new regulation, and are we really safe? Because also we do have new farmers who are joining the coffee sector. How do we safeguard ourselves to make sure that we are not encroaching land or property that was previously a forest?
Thank you so much. I think for me, from where I sit, what I can say about the European Union deforestation regulation is the government need to do more. Because if you talk to the farmers on the ground, they are not even aware of what is happening as far as the European Union deforestation regulations is concerned.
Yes.
And again, the European Union deforestation regulation is looking at compliance. Compliance is a host of many things that are supposed to be there, including the mapping. And the mapping is carrying the most significant cost for compliance.
And whose responsibility is it to do the mapping?
The responsibility is the producer.
Right.
Because he is the person who is supplying the coffee to the market. And the buyer, or the person who is the trader, if he trades that coffee that has not met the threshold, is not within the threshold, the penalty is so much, because about 4% of their turnovers. So nobody will want to touch this coffee. And this is coming to happen come next year.
Yes.
So in as far as
effect in January.
January next year, 2025.
Right.
And the preparations are not proper. And even if they are there, they are not coordinated.
Right.
Again, are we talking about a regulation that has not been domesticated? So we need to look at, if we want to have a clear mechanism of compliance, what are we talking about? So we need to have several other issues that are going to be addressed, including who is the owner of the data, who is going to host the data, how is that data going to be shared, who will be the custodian of this data. Right. So many things that are supposed to be done.
Right.
And the government should be able to support the farmer, because the smallholder farmer specifically has no capacity to do that.
Kwa hivyo hapo kuna kazi ya kufanya.
A lot of work.
Right.
A lot of work.
Okay. Now, when we talk about the waiver,
yes,
which is also one of the elephants in the room. Now, last week, during a meeting that was chaired by the President, cabinet meeting, they promised to clear a debt of about 6.8 billion that is owed by coffee farmers nationwide. And of course, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of submitting the people who have these loans and just making sure that there's a lot of transparency in the process. So from your point of view, to ensure that this clearance is done effectively also, how do all the parties involved need to organize themselves in this arrangement?
Well, thank you so much. I think this is a good thing. It's a very positive thing from the government.
Right.
That pronouncement has sent some positive response from the farmers on the ground. And what we can basically say is that once that is done, then we must also ensure that we are not going to go back in the same vicious cycle of borrowing. Borrowing is not bad, but we must also be able to borrow responsibly. Another thing is that we also need to look at, if the government is only going to waive the debt that belongs to the cooperative. There are farmers who borrowed money from the institution, be it the SACCOs or the banks, and they pledged these coffee sales as the source of their repayment. So it means, yes, we will build the capacity of the cooperative, but are we going to build the capacity of the farmers who are already indebted to their various institutions? So it is important to be holistic. And then from there, once that is done, we also look at the infrastructure under which the coffee is being processed, because some of the infrastructure is so dilapidated. So for the debts is a positive thing. But how we handle the debts is also a very important aspect that we also need to put into consideration. And finally, is an entire planning and a lot of capacity and capacity building and empowerment of the farmer to be able to understand how this business is supposed to be done.
Great.
Including a farmer, like for example, for me, when I'm a farmer on the ground and I'm elected, am I taken to any training? I become a farmer leader. But do I have the skills to read? That is another question. So
that brings back the point of capacity building that you were talking about.
Yes.
All right. Now, but the good news at least is the fact that there's a commitment of clearing debt of about 6.8 billion.
That commitment is very good.
Great.
But the question is, the money is trickling from the sales But now the banks that are old or the institutions that are old continue to recover the money. So what will be the effect of the same? So it can also create some conflict between the farmers and the leadership.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. Now, when we're also talking about the benchmarkings that we have seen happening, we have seen our country benchmarking from countries like Colombia, Ethiopia, and also we've had international investors and buyers come to Kenya to also see how our coffee is produced. From where you sit, have we started feeling the effect of, you know, the good ties that we're trying to form with countries that are doing absolutely well in the coffee sector? Has it started trickling down?
What I can say, nothing much has changed, but there's hope.
All right.
Because when you talk about the benchmarking, it means you are trying to compare yourself with another who is doing better than you. But we need to look at it from a perspective of the producer. Is the producer empowered enough to participate in the business of coffee? Or is he just a producer to give other people in the value chain to benefit from the coffee business?
Right.
So basically we are saying capacity empowerment for the farmer. And let's start from telling the farmer what is coffee.
Right.
Before we even talk about the issue of governance, let's deal with the business of coffee at the farmer's level. Thank you.
So we work backwards.
We work backwards so that then we empower the farmer to be able to understand the business of coffee, so that when he assumes the leadership, he's knowledgeable about the coffee, then the only thing that he needs to put is now the skills of leadership, which will be a bit easy.
Great. Now we're understanding so much the fact that safari ya mkulima isiishie tu hapo kwa shamba. They need to understand a lot more when it comes to the entire value chain. So now I want us to walk over to our other side of the set, where we do have a display of various qualities of coffee, right? So I can see here we have grade AA, which is premium.
That is premium grade.
Premium. We have AB. We have grade T, E, PB, TT, and grade C as well. Now, my question for you would be, there's an instance where in my farm I have done all that I need to do. Nime produce grade yangu AA, all right? And then there's another farmer who has grade C. Lakini kienda huko kwa cupping, where the tasting is done, probably grade C tastes way better than grade AA, and they fetch a higher price than I do. What happens there in between? And our farmers understanding the science as to why you with your grade A, you could actually make less money with from someone who has grade C. Help us understand.
Well, what I can say basically is that within the value chain or within the coffee business, the grades compare, comparatively are able to compare. But what normally happens is that when you have a grade AA from one farm, another grade AA from another farm, the quality attribute may be different. One, it's because of how about the husbandry. What is the farming practices that are being employed by those farmers? They could be different, meaning they will produce different cup quality. Another thing is that the environment is also very, very important under which this coffee is being grown. If you grow coffee in areas where you have, which is a bit warm, the coffee will grow very fast. The bean will develop very fast, and therefore it might not be able to take everything that is in the soil that is required to be in that particular bean. So that is why you find farmers are complaining, because you find the farmers who are talking about their coffee, they look at these particular grades. And this is what we are asking, can we be able to switch from dealing with the grades and start dealing with the cup quality?
Right.
So when we are presenting coffee in the auction or to the overseas buyers, we avoid talking so much about the grade and focus more on the quality attribute. So we can have the grade, yes, but we have another column where we are saying that this grade AA, these are the attributes that are in that particular grade.
Right.
And therefore, that way you'll be able to know if the qualities, attributes, and the flavors in that particular grade are comparing comparatively with the others, then we can be able to see the prices should not be very, the variance should not be very big. Should be able to compare favorably between one grade and the same grade, between the same grade but from different farms.
Right.
But when you are only looking at the size of the bean, like for example, you find this particular TT.
TT is
if
here.
you look at this size, the size could be the same of the AA. The size. But when you look at the density or the weight is less. the size could be the same.
Yeah.
This is lighter, and this is heavier.
Right.
Meaning it's coming from the same farm, the same tree, but because of how it was able to feed from the tree, this is what these are the results.
Great.
Yes.
So for our farmers to have that coffee that has good taste, good quality, what are some of the mistakes that they could be making at a farm level that hinders them from achieving that very good quality coffee when it comes to cupping, tasting, and all those other attributes that you look at?
For example, we start with the feeding. Feeding, we have seen of late, because of the changes that are there, we're no longer able to put manure to the farm. So we are heavily depending on the chemical fertilizers. And therefore, this is just like somebody who is giving you, what do you call it? The name is learning. But what we are basically saying, we need to feed the soil so that the soil can be able to feed the tree, and the tree can be able to feed the beans.
Right.
So basically what we are saying, let's put the manure, let's also put the fertilizers when they are needed. Let's also apply the foliar fertilizers when they are needed. Then another area that we also need to focus on is basically on the harvesting. When you're harvesting coffee, we need to harvest the red ripe cherry.
Right.
So that then we are very clear on the quality. But when we mix the ripes and the underripes and the overripes, then we get a mix of the quality attribute in that particular coffee.
All right. Thank you so very much, Peter Gikonyo. We could keep having this conversation because I know there's still a lot more to talk about, but we will keep having you here to talk a lot more. Sindio?
Thank you.
All right.
Can I say something?
Please go ahead.
I think for me, this show, and specifically this show, is so important, especially to the farmers. But unfortunately, the time is so short. Even before we could be able to say something, imeisha.
Tutaongea na wakubwa wafanye kitu.
We need to consider this.
All right. Yeah. Now, as we wind up, we always do something very interesting here, which we call the farm joke of the day. All right. And the question of the day, are you ready? You have to give me an answer in 3 seconds. So, and the question of the day is, why was the coffee barista fired? And for the sake of the young children who participate in these games, the barista is a person who serves in a coffee bar. So the question is, why was the coffee bar fired?
Because he did not bring out the flavor of coffee.
All right. And the answer is very simple. They kept showing up in a t-shirt. Tea, and they work in a coffee bar.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Peter Gikonyo, for being here today and talking to us about what is happening in the coffee sector. Of course, all the farmers, all the coffee farmers, thank you so much for the good job that you're doing. And right here at Kenya's Gold, we'll make sure that we keep following up with our leaders to make sure that the coffee sector is streamlined. Of course, our audience for choosing to be with us every single day.